It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome back to an episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Alan, I feel like we're fully back into the swing of things now. Third day in a row with the two of us here. How are we feeling?
I'm feeling good. We had a decent amount of news today, so there's lots of stuff to talk about. None of it's like groundbreaking stuff to talk about, but it's interesting, and I think we can get us some good conversation from it.
Well, if the Steelers needed another wide receiver 4/5 on the roster, they got him. Scotty Miller coming over. Another guy that was with Arthur Smith in Atlanta that he had acquired there and brought over. This makes the fourth guy that was in Atlanta with Arthur Smith brought over this offseason to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Scotty Miller, familiar with him? Going back to his time with Tampa Bay, although I actually did not realize that he was on the Atlanta Falcons roster last year until the Steelers signed him today. That's how little.
Neither did the Atlanta Falcons quarterbacks, actually. They were completely unaware that Scotty Miller was there last season, judging by the 16 targets that he got as their wide receiver 5 last year.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, he didn't have like a huge amount of success at any of his stops, obviously. Tom Brady was pretty vocal about liking him quite a bit when he had him in Tampa. Very specific skill set, can take the top off, obviously, but he's like a weird, like, tweener guy that he's not like fully a slot receiver. He's not fully a guy that can play on the outside.
Not either of those things, like, weirdly.
Yeah, that's what I'm like. Yeah, like
I don't know what to do with him. Motion or condensed split wide receiver only, basically. Like, you can't put him in the slot. You can't put him out wide. You have to do like weird things with him. I'll be honest, and I don't like to be this harsh on this podcast or in general in life. Really, I don't see Scotty Miller. I don't see it. From what I saw, he does not look like an NFL player right now. Like, I don't know where, like, special teamer maybe, but he's not big. Like with the new kickoff rules, you don't need fast. And also, like, ran a 4.3 something coming out of Bowling Green. But if you go look at, oh, by the way, those like 16 catches or whatever, 11 catches for 50 yards, whatever it was last year, like 85% of his yardage came on one catch last year.
Oh, yeah.
Where it was like completely uncovered, and a safety that ran like a 4.45 ran him straight down from behind. So like that 4.3 something speed, not there anymore. So yeah, I don't envision Scotty. Actually, just like, I don't even understand what the point of signing a Scotty Miller is. Like, they certainly are not lacking in small, fast guys. In fact, they've got like way too many of them to begin with. I don't even know why you bother to bring a guy like that in. The one thing that does come to mind is like, maybe you just want help teaching the offense. Nice to have some guys that have done it before that can show other people. Maybe if somebody gets hurt, you know, and you don't want to rely too much on young guys early in the season, you would have someone who knows the scheme that could step in early. I don't know. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of upside in signing guys like Scotty Miller to me. I'd be very surprised if he makes the team.
That's exactly what I was going to bring up. I was having a conversation in a group chat, and you actually, I believe, mentioned that same thought on X in terms of, you know, what is his role even going to be here? Is it just a guy that is familiar with Arthur Smith's offense, so he comes here, kind of teaches the wide receivers that in camp, and then does not make the 53 out of camp? That seems to be a path that I certainly could see the case being, because like you said, you know, you have Quez Watkins here, you have Calvin Austin here. What way does Scotty Miller carve out a role? Like, what is the path for him actually making this 53 here? He'd have to, in my opinion, greatly outperform those two. Calvin Austin, obviously already in the organization. Quez Watkins brought in before Scotty Miller. It's just hard for me to see a path for him to the 53.
Yeah. I mean, Calvin Austin had more production with the Steelers last year as a rookie, is faster, is, you know, I don't know what, you know, there's no, I mean, other than knowing the offense, I don't see what the advantage is. So that has to be it. That has to be all of it. And they don't have any shortage of veteran. Like, forget the guys that, like, yeah, I mean, they brought in Quez Watkins, they brought in Van Jefferson, and they had Calvin Austin. But, like, I actually think the Steelers kind of practice squaddy, like, Des Fitzpatrick played a little bit last year. I thought he's like a reasonable fringe pro guy. Mims has been in the NFL, has played. Callaway has been in the NFL as well. Like they have a ton of these like sort of hanger-on type wide receivers. I mean, they've probably got what 10, 11 deep wide receivers that have all played in the NFL. Yeah. They don't have just the one rookie. Like, and so I don't know what Scotty Miller brings to the table that the rest of that group doesn't. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a nothing signing to me. I don't think it changes anything about the team's obvious need for another wide receiver to go along with George Pickens.
And I think that was the other part of this conversation was I don't know how anybody could think that it would, but I'm sure just because you see like an addition of a receiver in any capacity in some people's minds thinks, okay, that means that's them checking that box. Like if there's no way in my opinion that it would be, especially when, again, you look at the stones that they've turned.
If we don't think Van Jefferson, who is a far better player, checks that box, then Scotty Miller certainly does not.
Sure. So, I mean, I fully still believe that they are going to try to acquire another receiver in some capacity prior to the start of the season. Now, whether that comes to fruition or not, we will see. I tend to believe that it's going to. But I wanted to ask you, you just brought up Van Jefferson, so that kind of took me in a different direction. Who from this roster, as we sit here today, I think this is an interesting question, from the wide receiver room, do you believe are like locks? And then where does the competition start?
I think Pickens, Wilson, and Jefferson are locks. Okay. I can't see any of them not making the team. They're the only, I mean, Pickens and Jefferson are the only two outside receivers. Even if they add one, they need three. Okay. And so, and then Wilson, obviously, you're going to catch a third round pick no matter what happens. And so after that, like right now, I think Quez Watkins and Calvin Austin are both on the team. But if they trade for someone, will they keep 6? Will they only keep 5? And if they only keep 5, which one of those two guys is it? I think that's a very interesting question. I think that is where the competition really starts.
Which way are you leaning right now between 5? Because I would lean 5 just because of Arthur Smith's offense, and I think they'll want 4 tight ends.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, right? Is that if you're going to play a lot of 2 tight ends and you sign Michael Pruitt, another one of these Arthur Smith guys, but a guy that I think is much more established as an NFL player than Scotty Miller is, a guy who looks like he still belongs here. And so if you're going to sign Michael Pruitt, then he's making the team, right? And so then that makes, unless they cut Connor Hayward, I don't know, 4 tight ends, right? Like I think that feels pretty solid. I can't see there's no way it's 4 tight ends and 6 wide receivers. There won't be 10 between the two.
Alan, even if they cut Connor Hayward, I don't see that happening. I would make a case for Rodney Williams as a 4th tight end before a 6 wide receiver still.
I agree. I think Rodney Williams is a really tough cut. I'll be perfectly honest. I wouldn't want to put him through waivers. But yeah, I mean I think 5 wide receivers feels like enough. They're going to use they're going to use a lot of tight ends. If they want to use a fullback, they need Hayward. They're not going to keep 4 running backs, I don't think. And so they will want Hayward's, so he's too flexible. Like, I don't know. I don't see where I don't see how they get 6 wide receivers. So last year they kept, and I think the last couple of years, actually, they've kept 24 offensive players and 26 defensive players. Maybe if they want to pull a player off the defense and add one more to the offense and go 25-25, maybe you can then start to get to getting a 6th wide receiver, but I think it's pretty tough. I think it's 5 of these guys, and I think right now the 5 are pretty clear. What happens when if you add another one to it is where it gets interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, back to that because I kind of got sidetracked by that conversation. But you put out on X the hypothetical trade that would have taken to land Brandon Aiyuk. We had gone back even further than that when it was reported about the Jaguars' interest, them looking for 17 and a player. Wasn't that player actually, now having this conversation, wasn't that player Zay Jones who they ended up cutting?
They ended up cutting, yeah.
So, okay. Well, anyway, going back to that conversation, though, trying to come up with like the capital that would make sense, pick number 20 and pick number 98 in the 3rd round, the second of the 2 third-rounders that the Steelers had, to San Francisco for Brandon Aiyuk. Say that would have gotten it done. You were kind of, testing the water with Steelers fans. Would they have been willing to do that deal, and then also have to obviously give Brandon Aiyuk a new contract. That has to happen. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation about Brandon Aiyuk leaving San Francisco, which I think is a very interesting conversation and kind of plays into all of this as we search for another receiver.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess, would you have taken that trade?
I love Brandon Aiyuk. Like, if they would have done it, I could have talked myself into being super excited just to have Brandon Aiyuk on the team. But like, had that been on the table for them and it was the Steelers that said no, I wouldn't be upset about them saying no. Like, I would talk myself into it either way, but I think that's just so rich for me for where the team is at right now. Like, if they already had a franchise quarterback in place and everything like that, like if I felt really good about where they were at the most important positions long term, sure. Like, a Kansas City can make that
for
trade.
The Buffalo Bills. Why didn't the Buffalo Bills make that trade?
I don't know.
Right?
I don't know.
They should have.
Question.
Yeah.
But that's another one of those teams. Like, a team like that, if they make that trade, I don't think you're questioning it. But like, if the Steelers do that again with, not knowing what the long-term future is at quarterback, still obviously need help on the offensive line, there's just too many questions, I think, for them to be able to do that.
So, I mean, I said it's very funny that you said that you would have talked yourself into it if they had done it, because when there was talk about the Steelers trading for Brandon Aiyuk, I was on the record saying even just 20 was way too much for me, that I would not have even traded, forget 98, even just 20, I would not have traded for Brandon Aiyuk. And I got a lot of crap. All the Steelers fans like, he's so good. Well, you make that trade. And now they didn't make it, and you look at what they got in the draft. And now I put this on X today. I was like, would you have made this trade? Literally, I think I got one response that was, I would have done that. There's like 400. No way, man. I'm glad we got what we got. Like, and I guarantee if the Steelers had traded for Brandon Aiyuk, and then I tweet out there, hey, you remember when the Steelers traded for Brandon Aiyuk? Would you have rather had Troy Fautanu and Peyton Wilson? It would have been 99-1 saying, no way, man. I'm glad we got Brandon Aiyuk. Forget those guys. We don't need them. Like, there's a whole lot of that. So appreciate the awareness, the self-awareness.
Oh, absolutely. Like, and this is where, like, I am totally in lockstep. And I know my guy, Zach Celedonia Flash is in lockstep with me on this. Like, same exact mindset with these things where, like, realistically, we know in our heart of hearts that is not a trade that the Steelers should make. But if they make it, oh, absolutely, we're all in. We're buying Aiyuk jerseys immediately. Like, this is what they should have done all along.
And so look, I think it's interesting that they, well, let's also get into the other part of why. And I talked about why a lot, and that, like, I just think the Steelers need to address their offensive line. I don't think they need wide receiver that badly to use that many resources on that position. They did get a top tackle and a top center in the draft by staying put. I'm like, Peyton Wilson, like, I mean, he's a really good player, but like, you could do without him. Like, that part of it, you can kind of talk yourself into maybe. But getting Fautanu at 20 and Frazier at 51 was like a top tier outcome for those draft picks. Like, the way it fell, maybe if the draft doesn't go so well, you're thinking about it differently. But man, I think I'd have a very hard time with what was available to them. But the other part of this is that I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility that Brandon Aiyuk is still traded this offseason, and it's going to be for less than that. If it does, at least in terms of the impact on the 2024 season, right? Like we talked about, like, they were not motivated sellers. They can keep all those guys. They don't have to trade them. They have the cap space. There's no reason they have to trade them. So the only reason to trade them is if they get a big thing, or if things get ugly later. So wait and see if things get ugly, and then be the team that tries to swoop in and get a bargain after his dad goes on social media and says Brock Purdy sucks, like OBJ did, or he refuses to report to training camp, like many of other people have, or whatever. Like, let it get ugly and let them become a motivated seller, and then swoop in for a little bit less. I think that makes a lot more sense than what they did. It does require leaving yourself without an obvious second wide receiver and letting people like me and you sit here all offseason saying, what the heck is Omar doing at wide receiver, right? Like, that's the downside.
From a content perspective, appreciate it. But
yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Omar. I'll get you
keep it going a little bit longer
next time I see you. But I think I think it's smarter to do it that way if you're hyper focused on trade. And we've talked about, it doesn't seem like they're that interested. Zay Jones taking a third free agent visit today, essentially, to go back to our prom metaphor, Zay Jones is wearing an "Ask Me to Prom" T-shirt to school. Okay, and the Steelers are like, no, I'm not into it. Right.
Can you smile real quick, Zay? Oh, you got braces? Yeah. We'll wait on somebody else.
Yeah, I really had my heart set on a blonde. Like I just, but so. Yeah, they just seem like they're not interested. They've got their heart set on a bigger target, I guess. So we'll see how it plays out. But I think that price then was a bad decision for the Steelers. I think it was the right call to pass on that price. And then, obviously everybody else did too. I think that's the other part of it is you feel better about your decision when nobody else pulled the trigger, right? If somebody else had done it, then you start to think like, what are they thinking that we're not thinking? And maybe, okay, if it's Buffalo, you say, okay, well, yeah, whatever. The Bills are, a different. What if it's Jacksonville? What if it's the Chargers, right? A team that's like not sort of obviously in the same, closer to winning a championship with this guy than the Steelers are. And then you're like, maybe there was something there. But the fact that everybody said, you know what, that's just too high, I feel a lot better about that decision because of that.
Yeah, that does make sense too. And I don't know. I this is speculation at this point, and I've seen people throw out, is this the way that it would work too? Like, would they be better off in 2024 cap wise with an extension for Brandon Aiyuk?
The 49ers or the Steelers?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you with an extension, you could reduce his 2024 cap hit. Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just keep going back to that. Like, where are you at with that as we sit here right now? Do you think
I don't think that the 49ers need to trade him. I don't think they will trade him unless he makes it a problem playing out the contract.
Yeah, I feel
I think if he is willing to show up and do his job and not be a problem and play out the last year, I think they'll do that. I don't see any reason for they're a legitimate Super Bowl contender. They don't have to trade him. It's not like one of these deals where it's like the Pirates and you're like, oh, can't keep this guy and lose him for nothing. Got to move him. No, the 49ers can win a Super Bowl. Who cares if they lose him after that? Great. Somebody else sign him. I don't see why they would feel like they would need to do that.
I feel like for us too in Pittsburgh, it's probably making it louder because it's a receiver and we want a receiver. But the 49ers have gone about business like this a lot with their top players before extending them. They wait. It probably happened this summer. If something is going to get done, it wouldn't have happened at this point in the year anyway. Sure, guys have made a bigger deal about it. We saw how Deebo Samuel played out before he ultimately got extended, but they've gone late into the process with George Kittle, Fred Warner. Look at where Nick Bosa was before he signed an extension right before playing the Steelers last year. These guys, this is just how the 49ers operate. So I don't know. I tend to think he's still going to be a 49er.
Yeah, I think so too. And the other thing I keep going back to is maybe you can pry Juwan Jennings out of them if they decide that they're going to keep him. If they do sign an extension, then maybe Juwan Jennings becomes available. And I think that's more within reasonable price range for the Steelers anyway, in terms of what they're going to need their wide receiver to do anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously Aiyuk would not be wide receiver 2, but yeah, I mean, you get what I'm saying.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, he falls into that bucket for me, but man, he would be a perfect fit, by the way. We're talking about, George not being the greatest blocker, Van Jefferson probably the best blocker on the team right now. Roman Wilson, obviously the effort is certainly there, but with his frame, not going to be able to take on everybody. But I certainly appreciate the effort. But if you get Jennings in here, might be the best blocking receiver in football, certainly up there, if not number one.
Certainly the best certainly the best blocking receiver that regularly plays on the outside. A lot of the outside receivers are not good blockers. In the slot, you kind of have to block. He's a great outside receiver blocker. And can we talk about? I want to go on a rant. Do I have 3 minutes to go on a rant here?
Yeah, I mean, we only got one other thing to talk about, I believe. So yeah.
Okay, I think we have 2, but that's fine.
Oh, you're right.
So when we talk about wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3, that is very different than where the guy plays on the field. And I feel like people, when we're talking about this with the Steelers, are getting this confused. Okay.
Yeah.
Wide receiver,
I know where you're going with this.
Wide receiver 1 just means that is your primary receiving weapon. Travis Kelce is the wide receiver 1 on the Kansas City Chiefs. He plays tight end. Tyreek Hill is the wide receiver 1 for the Miami Dolphins, and he plays in the slot. It does not matter where that guy lines. That is just their role within the offense. So when we're talking about what the Steelers need, people are like, oh, why couldn't Roman Wilson be wide receiver 2? Roman Wilson could be their second most important target. Absolutely. That is well within the realm of possibility. But he is going to play in the slot. And what they need is somebody else to play outside. You have X, Z, slot. Tight end's the Y. Why they didn't give slot a letter, I don't know. I didn't come up with it. Okay.
S.
Yeah. Right. so the X is your big physical outside receiver, Michael Irvin. Your Z is your flanker, your guy who takes one step off the line of scrimmage, usually your release guy, Deontay Johnson, sort of the archetype, right? Flanker. And then you have your slot. But you can make any of those guys the primary target of your passing offense. It's two different things, right? The Steelers don't need the Steelers could use Roman Wilson a whole heck of a lot, but they're not going to use Roman Wilson a whole heck of a lot as an outside receiver when he didn't even do that in Michigan. Like, he was mostly a slot receiver in college. When you're taking guys from college to the pros, it is a difficult adjustment, period. Even if you are doing the exact same thing that you did before. If you want a guy to do a lot as a rookie, ask him to do the exact same thing. Don't ask him to do something he's never done before at a different level of football. It's very, very difficult, okay? Now, if you're asking a first-round pick to do that, maybe that's a realistic expectation, like asking Broderick Jones to play some right tackle. Now, you're talking about a third-round pick? I mean, I think you're, like, outside the realm of, like, reasonable outcomes here. So the Steelers need another outside receiver. They need a Z or an X, because George Pickens could probably be either of those. They don't need somebody else to play in the slot. What role that person takes in the offense in terms of targets and how involved they are in the passing game, I think that's TBD, right? If it's Brandon Aiyuk, he's 1, right? If it's Zay Jones, maybe he is 3. I don't know. But I feel like people are conflating those two pieces of terminology when we're talking about this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. That goes back, man, so long. Like, most people just always used to think the third best out of your receivers that are on the field at the time play in the slot. Like, I used to have those conversations with people all the time. And
there are very good slot receivers that could not ever play outside, and vice versa. It is almost two different positions. Now, there are some guys that can play both. Deontay Johnson was one of them. But there are guys that are going to be just guys that you want to play in the slot. And there are guys that could be just guys who want to play outside. And that's okay. And that's what the Steelers need. They need another guy outside, especially if you want to play 2 tight ends. Because when you play 2 tight ends, the slot receiver goes away. You have 2 outside receivers. And in fact, in a 2 tight end set, in a balanced set, sometimes you kind of end up with like double X, right? You have like 2 wide receivers on the line of scrimmage. You have 2, and the reason those are bigger guys is that if you're on the line of scrimmage, that means the cornerback is right on you from the snap. And so you need stronger guys that can deal with that press more regularly, as opposed to a flanker who gets a step off and a slot who gets all kinds of room to release, right? Not just the step, but can kind of break different directions and goes in motion, does a number of different things. And so, it's different body types. It's different player styles, but that's not the same as their importance to the offense. Do the Steelers need a wide receiver 2? I don't know. They're not going to throw that much. Like, I think Roman Wilson being the second in targets at the end of the season among Steelers wide receivers is not a catastrophic outcome, but he can't play outside. They need somebody else to do that.
Right. Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned the body type thing too, when talking about this, because like Juju Smith-Schuster best in the slot, obviously. And I know that,
Yeah.
like, obviously the knees have gone now and he's not the same type of player, but when he was at his best as like a power slot here in Pittsburgh, bigger type of receiver that you could mismatch, like you would think body type wise, a lot of people would be like, oh, that's probably a guy that plays on the outside. But
Yeah.
no, like
Not always. Yeah. Not
yeah.
always. Yeah. Chase Claypool,
Uh,
same thing. He was way better. Yeah.
Chase Claypool was way better in the slot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else on the receivers?
Martavis Bryant.
Martavis Bryant. Yeah, that look that the Dallas Cowboys were getting at him did not end up with him even getting to what point of the season are we at right now? OTAs.
Yeah,
Didn't
even
even get to OTAs with the Dallas Cowboys as he was released. So back on the market. Do you think that was like agent speak in the post about him, that there was like other teams with interest that might want to get a look now? Or how did you take that? Or do you
No,
think that
because
genuinely is?
when you get cut now, it's usually like a do you a favor cut. Like,
Okay.
hey, we looked and you're like way on the depth chart, man. Like, if there's somebody else that might be able to make better use of you, why don't we let you go do that now instead of having you go through summer in our system and our scheme for us to definitely cut you anyway. Ben DiNucci got cut today by the Broncos. Same thing. Like, hey, you're waiting on the depth chart here. Find somewhere else. So I do believe that there are other teams that are interested in Martavis Bryant.
Mm-hmm.
I also wonder, like, if you're Martavis Bryant, I don't know, like, you don't get that much for being on the NFL roster from January to May, a couple $100 a day for showing up for workouts for the last couple weeks. I feel like he kind of got screwed here, like, because he could have been in the UFL, like actually playing. And considering that he hasn't played that much, he did play in the XFL last year, but considering he hasn't played that much, I feel like he might have done more for himself by playing than he did sitting on the Cowboys roster, doing nothing. But I do believe there are teams that will want to take a look at him. It was reported when the Cowboys signed him that there were other teams that wanted to work him out, and they signed him first. They get the first workout and they signed him. So I believe there is still some interest. Whether one of those teams is the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm pretty skeptical.
This is a Steelers podcast. I'm not sure that there's ever been crossover with the Pittsburgh Pirates, but in real time, just want to mention Paul Skeens coming up to start on Saturday for the Pittsburgh Pirates. There you have it. And and the last thing, this is Steelers related, getting back to this, that I wanted to bring up. Ray Fittipaldo was on 93.7 this morning, mentioned that a Cam Sutton reunion with the Steelers feels like it's very possible. Maybe they're just waiting to see how it plays out with the league. Would they hand out a suspension to him while he's a free agent, or would they wait until he signs with the team to levy that?
I think they can give him the suspension while he's not on a team. He can't serve it until he's on a team.
Sure.
But they can give it to him while he's not on a team. Yeah, I don't know where he is, in the legal process and in the NFL's investigation. I believe the last thing that I had read about his legal status was that he was in some sort of pretrial diversion, which is, generally about how you kind of give up your trial, right? You kind of, but as part of that, and again, I'm not exactly sure how it works in Florida, but like here in Pennsylvania, you kind of have to admit that you did it to do that. And so I don't know if that is going to count like a conviction would count in the NFL's eyes in terms of it being an automatic suspension. If you're convicted in the NFL, it's an automatic 6-game suspension. If you're not convicted, it could be it's up to the discretion of the commissioner and the league's disciplinary individuals. And so I'm not sure which one of those that this is going to fall under, but it certainly is not a felony conviction, right? Where like, I think now you're in the realm of it's just whether he's going to be available and what's going to happen with the legal process, and not like, oh, this guy's toxic and we don't want to touch him. Like, I think a felony charge would have been, I think at this point, I would be very surprised if some NFL team does not sign Cam Sutton this year.
And like, man, like I don't know. I struggle to have this conversation. Like I try to make it. I know that it's not just about football. Obviously, when you're talking about a player like this dealing with something like this, but from a football perspective, with them having the options or lack thereof right now in the slot, that certainly makes sense. It's where Cam Sutton played his best. Obviously, didn't go great in Detroit with him last year because they tried to play him much more on the outside than Pittsburgh ever did. So
There's no
I think
question
that
that the player is a perfect fit for what they need. Like,
sure.
Exactly perfect.
Yeah.
That's unquestionable.
Yeah. And we know that he was in Pittsburgh. Jerry Dulac put out that he met with the team, Omar and Tomlin, a week before the draft. Who knows what that conversation was like? We know that they cared deeply about the people as well. Maybe they were just checking in on him because of everything like this. But he was also in Pittsburgh again as recently as last week. As you mentioned, like he spent 6 years of his career here. Like maybe this is just comfortable for him to be here while this is all playing out. So again, this is pure speculation at this point, if anything is going to materialize, but I fully agree with you that like whether it's with Pittsburgh or somebody else, he's going to have a home on a football team in 2024, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so. And look, I think you can, I think you have an opinion about whether you want your team to have somebody like that. But I think it's, look, the league has a policy for a reason. The policy sets parameters for punishment that go beyond the law, which I think is important in terms of domestic violence, because so many times these cases are not prosecuted at all, or minimally. Witnesses don't want to cooperate, and so I think it was very important that the league put this policy in place where it goes beyond whether you're found guilty or not. The league's going to do its own investigation. But, I think people also deserve second chances in life. And I think Cam Sutton, in my experience with Cam Sutton, I was very surprised to hear what he had been accused of doing, what he has running from police. And it did not fit with the character of the person I knew. And so I would not be surprised if the Steelers would be willing to give him a second chance. I think that seems like it's pretty within their kind of character of what, like you said, like deeply care about these people, and it would not surprise me at all.
Yeah, it's one of those things that like just interests me to see how it plays out. Obviously I know very little about what went down. Obviously the process, I don't know anything about that. So I try to just talk from a football perspective here. And I think that the fit makes sense, but if they feel like it wasn't a fit for personal reasons, then so be it. We'll see how it plays out. Alan, anything else?
I don't think so. I think that's about it.
Okay. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Keep the YouTube comments coming. We got a good question yesterday, and I'm not going to give it away, but I want to get to it. But we got to spend more time on it. And today seemed like a wide receiver-y day in the news about the running game. So I want to get to that at some point. But keep those comments and questions coming. Really love when you guys drive this conversation, because I feel like we're all in the van together, right? And it's pretty cool. So keep those coming. As
you can tell by the logo that sits above Alan, there's a lot of seats in this thing. So yeah, keep those comments coming.
Lots of room in the van. It's and there's
we know Thomas Brosh is back here.
Bus kind of like vibe where like we can fit as many people in there as we really want to, right? I mean,
it's the bus version of a clown car.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and we know Thomas Brocious is back there as well.
So. Heck yeah.
Alan, tell the people where they can find you
at @Saunders_PGH, PGH Steelers Now, SteelersNow.com. Like and subscribe to YouTube channel, push that bell for notifications, and I think that's it.
There you go. And if you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from, be sure to leave us a 5-star review over there, subscribe over there, all that good stuff. I don't know why you'd be listening as opposed to watching when you could look at these two faces while getting the same content, but if that's your choice, so be it. You can find me everywhere.
If you are taking your afternoon drive, keep eyes on the road. Just listen.
Yeah, that's true. That might have been bad advice. Yeah, do not be watching on YouTube.
Especially don't be looking at us while driving. That's the worst thing you could do.
I was about to make a reference. I hope that people. I don't know if people would get it. Do you remember in the SpongeBob movie? Did you ever watch the SpongeBob movie? You have a daughter, so
I've seen the SpongeBob movie. Sorry.
All right. Well, King takes his hat off. and he's bald, and it's like very shiny, and SpongeBob goes blind basically and just starts screaming bald when that happens. So I was gonna say, like, if you look at our faces while driving, I don't want anybody to have that type of moment while operating a vehicle.
I had a woodshop teacher in high school who was very bald with a very shiny head. And I always thought it was like a borderline safety hazard. You have people working with power equipment that could just be blinded at any moment by the glare. But it is what it is.
There we go. Find me everywhere, Zachary Smith, PGH. For Alan Saunders and myself, thanks for jumping in and taking another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.